So, troubleshooting. There are a few gotchas that are true as of this video that I want to point out that might help you going forward. General concepts that I think might cover a broad range of possibilities of what could be going on if things aren't working for you. This is a very brittle sort of bit of timing because both platforms are being actively developed and they do change, and some things deprecate and some things stay fairly stable, and they have been improving. Both platforms have been improving steadily through the course of their progress, and that's been awesome. Certainly much better than the early days where if you had a problem and you didn't have a direct contact to like Facebook, you were just not going to get any help. It's better now, but there are things to be aware of, and they're just like general concepts that if you're new to these platforms, it takes messing around and breaking stuff a little bit and trying to string together things that don't work to get it all to make sense. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is what happens in situations where you know your effect is like something's just not showing up right. Like I know there are some like facial diamond things that are a normal part of that nighttime scene. Where did they go? What's going on? Or you put them all in and they're just not showing up when you have all these other elements. One thing to check for is the advanced render options of the material. So in this case, we have the face diamond material. It should be showing up here, but it's not. If I go into advanced render options and I take away these checks, we're back. This has happened to me several times where the stacking of graphical elements does funny things to the composite, and it actually will make sense why it's doing that, but it can be hard to track. In this case, I want those facial diamonds, when they are visible, to be up front and on top of things regardless of what else is stacked on them visually. If I have this checked right to depth, use depth test, I'm telling Metaspark Studio to take into account where in the layers of things this material is being applied, and that's what's concealing this. Which is also to say, we might also notice that the segmentation is not there. Like, where's the person? They're gone. That's because the background layer is on top of it, stacked above the segmentation layer. If I were to move this up, suddenly magic-ish. You see how we have different effects based on where the segmentation is. Disappeared. Now we take away those writing to depth, and I'll move this up, and that looks better. All our eyes effects are where they should be. Diamonds are back. Now we're much happier. So the point is that you want to track your layers and make sure you name them. It makes troubleshooting much easier. The combination of layers and material render options will solve a lot of problems when you start layering in elements. As far as color encoding, linear means that when math is being applied to your color, it's 1-to-1, like a 0.25 numerical value for a color will be a 0.25 elsewhere, and sRGB is relative to like the color space of the screen you're using. So it's specifically about digital screens and how they display their color information, things like that. The most generally compatible, therefore, is just linear. Kind of means that the math on your color doesn't change from one screen to the next. It's the most consistent visual, but you do have the option of playing with that. I rarely, if ever, mess with this, and it usually isn't part of troubleshooting. But this definitely can be. Depth plus layer stuff, absolutely can come in. Color mask, not so much. These are almost always all checked. But if you wanted to segregate colors you could do it here, and you see the difference. I took out the green channel of that background material. But by default, these will all be checked. The other thing to pay attention to with Metaspark Studio is how you transfer data between two different node types. So a pulse node, let's pause that here. A pulse node is a different kind of data type than a numerical addition node. And if I try to string these together, I'm going to get an error. And Metaspark Studio will allow us sometimes to connect even incompatible nodes. And Metaspark Studio will, when you drag out and release to have it suggest a node, will not necessarily suggest a node that is compatible with the node. It'll let me add that node even though it's not going to work. So how do we get around this? How do what we want to do is whatever this thing is, pulses, we want to add something to it. We want to increase the value of something that we're going to string into something else. So it happens that the pulse, though, is compatible with a counter node. And you see it's not requiring some kind of numerical input by default. It just takes this trigger that the pulse is, and then it will do something. In this case, I will count up. And I've got this enabled just so it'll do it. There, 1, added to 2, now I've got 3. So now we're functioning. And now we've converted this trigger into a numerical value. Get rid of this. It doesn't have to add anything. It can just each time you have something, maybe an object tap, that sends out a pulse, and that will just increase the value here. So you've converted that data type. Likewise, if you have a runtime, which is a steady stream of numbers, like let's just pull out the raw value. I've had this going for 106 seconds. So it's a steady second by second with your fractional amount. I want to pulse. I want to convert this numerical value that's coming out to a pulse value. How do I do that? Well, one way you can do it is to create some form of logic. Using a logic control gate will take whatever is being input into it and then output a true or false. And that simple binary response can be accepted as a trigger. So let's see, runtime. After I've been on, had the effect on for greater than 2 seconds, I will then receive a true. Let's restart. So I get okay, so at that point, I should be sending out a pulse, basically. You see it connects directly, no problem. Restart real quick. Watch here. Yep, right away. If I try to go straight in, it won't let me. It gives me a red, and it actually doesn't just do that, it disappears the input node. Tries to help you out a little bit. So that is something that can be a pain point in node-based effect creation, is that you're often wanting to do things that require you to think about what the type of data is that's coming out of something and what it needs to be to go into something. But there are ways around it. When you have numbers, you can use comparative logic, and that will give you a lot of options that will output something that is compatible with a trigger. Likewise, if you have some kind of trigger, you can convert that to a number by using a node that accepts that trigger input. In Effect House, it's a little bit easier. Effect House is much nicer right now at suggesting things that are going to be compatible out of the gate. So if I have this start patch, everything I see here is something it's going to be able to connect to. Green pipe all the way down. And it's also color-coded. in ways that can visually tell you right away if it's going to be able to work. These green nodes are not going to fly into these gray nodes. If I want to, for example, I'll do a set image. Once I start, I want to do something with an image. I can't do anything here, but what these are meant to do is be associated as these numbers can be piped in this way, I mean to say. Like I want to adjust the size. It says automatically, oh, that's not quite the right data type. Well, Effect House has a data convert node. So it'll take this input and give you options of all the outputs it can convert it to. And then we have a compatible structure. So there's not as much to say about the difficulties of connecting nodes in Effect House in a way, because it will give you good options out of the gate for what it can do. And you can use that as a means of thinking about how you need to convert your data types, and you get the option of a data convert general node that can deal with vectors, which are x in vector 2 is xy, vector 3 is xyz, vector 4 is RGBA. So with a, the last number in the vector 4 will be alpha, or just colors, taking being associated with a color input and then pulling vector 3 or vector 4 data out of that. If you had a color and you pulled vector 3 out of it, you would be getting RGB. Vector 4 will give you RGBA, so the alpha channel as well. So not as tough that way. With Effect House, the difficulty lay more in rationalizing the flow of these connection points and how you initialize and reference your objects. So I hope that helps. That's an example of the kinds of things you can do, think about, use to troubleshoot your effects as you bring them together if things aren't quite working. But I'm not offering you these templates and these concepts and these tutorials and leaving you in the lurch if you have any trouble at all. You will get a response. As of this video, which is April 2023, I do have a day job. So if there is a delay in the response, please give me a little bit of leeway there, because it might be something I'm doing either the next morning or in the evening after work, just depending on how crazy things are for me that day.